So it's no surprise that the left are hypocrites. And if you ever needed a greater example of that, in the last few weeks, we've seen it right here in the state of Arkansas concerning something called African American Studies and whether or not high schools will be allowed to offer the course. Of course, the high schools, a few of them across the state, disagree with the Department of Education, which just goes to show that it's not really about loyalty to government. It's, well, if it's the government I approve of, then I'll do what they say. If I don't approve of the government, then I won't take their advice. When they're telling me that offering these courses may, in fact, be in violation of state law, the new LEARNS Act, if you will. Hello, welcome back to Conservative Arkansas Media, everybody. My name is Paul Harrell. It's been a while, a little bit under the weather. Oh, and speaking of under the weather, this was certainly refreshing to come out of Governor Sarah Huckabee Sanders' office. Take a listen.
COVID lockdowns killed businesses, tore apart communities, and stunted our kids' education. And now they're talking about doing it again. So let me be clear. As long as I'm governor, Arkansas will never lock down. We will not close our schools, our churches, or our businesses. We will never make you or your children wear a mask. And we will never, ever have a COVID-19 vaccine mandate. Government should never loom larger than individual liberty in our lives. That's the principle our nation was founded on. And if the federal government ever comes to tell us to shut down again, my administration will fight to keep Arkansas free.
So there you go. Yeah, very refreshing compared to what we had the last time with Governor Asa Hutchinson, where you really honestly didn't know if everybody that didn't want to wear a mask was going to be put in camps. We definitely don't have that now. What a breath of fresh air that is. We're not going to lock down. We're not going to force masks. We're not going to force vaccines. And the biggest deal is we're not going to lock down our churches. Now, depending on how much the hysteria, if the hysteria is going to really ramp up the way it did, I honestly don't know. I think it will in liberal enclaves. They clearly want to do this again. This is, and really it's not a joke. This is now being called the election variant because 2024 is approaching. We obviously have everything that's going on with the lawfare against President Donald Trump. And every time every time there's something that happens that exposes the Bidens, there's a new Trump indictment, and we've all been witnessing this for a very, very long time. But I will say it is just refreshing. A lot of the people, by the way, we're going to find out the churches specifically who shut down for way too long. Deprived their people of meeting, and many of the congregants wanted to meet, but it was the people who the pastors, the elders that were saying no, the deacons saying no, we're not going to meet. A lot of it was leadership. We're about to find out real quick, depending on how the hysteria of the media goes, how effective their brainwashing mechanism is this time. We're going to find out real quick because there's a lot of pastors who've said, never again, we're never going to do this again, we're not going to lock down again the way we did last time. Well, they're about to run the whole operation back. The whole PSYOP is coming back, and we're about to find out whether or not the people who said never again, we should have never locked down, we're about to find that out if that really was true. Masking. I'm starting to see it though. I'm starting to see masking again. People starting to wear it again. When of course it's just, by the way, just like basically a bacteria collector for your face. Not to mention it doesn't actually stop the virus or whatever it is from infecting other people because of the I mean, the CDC actually got caught the other day, by the way. They got caught because during all of the wildfires, the mysterious wildfires, they said that these masks won't actually block out the smoke particles. Well, the smoke particle is much larger than a teeny tiny virus. So if it's not going to help with smoke, then how does it help with? Anyway, we've been through this over and over again. But the groundwork has been laid here. I mean, I believe YouTube has new standards now where they've come out and saying that we will not allow you to say anything that is the opposite of the World Health Organization. Now, this is interesting because YouTube recently changed their terms of service to where you can now talk about election fraud because that was banned after the 2020 election. But now they're saying we don't want anybody to speak out against what the official guidelines are from the World Health Organization. So, I mean, we'll see, because that was one of the things that came with COVID. It wasn't just the medical industrial complex going full communist. It was essentially which, by the way, that was something that the people on the right have been warning for a very long time. But I don't think they actually knew. I don't think we knew how many battles we had lost to get to this point. But the other thing that came with COVID was just mass censorship. Mass censorship came with COVID. And that's where you got the familiar trope of, if it's a conspiracy theory, just wait 6 months and the media will finally report on what they called a conspiracy theory 6 months ago. Anyway, I digress. I find it interesting. Let's reset here. Let's listen again. This is Governor Sarah Huckabee Sanders.
COVID lockdowns killed businesses, tore apart communities, and stunted
Truth.
our kids' education.
Yes.
And now they're talking about doing it again. So let me be clear. As long as I'm governor, Arkansas will never lock down. We will not close our schools, our churches, or our businesses. We will never make you or your children wear a mask. And we will never, ever have a COVID-19 vaccine mandate.
There we go.
Government should never loom larger than individual liberty in our lives. That's the principle our nation was founded on. And if the federal government ever comes to tell us to shut down again, my administration will fight to keep Arkansas free.
That's right. There you go. All right, so I find that interesting because I'm going to tie these two topics together. So what we opened with was African American studies. So I find it interesting that there were superintendents, and we need to ask ourselves the question, and I know this is I don't want this to be a blanket statement, but how come so many of the positions, like a superintendent, superintendents make really good money. How come so many of them are liberal? How come so many of them are progressive? Let me just say, how come so many of them are not conservative and are allergic to, I don't know, the Bill of Rights? Why is that? And it's not just people, it's not just superintendents. It seems to be doctors. Obviously, it's lawyers. Why is it that there are so many in our local communities, the people that get elevated to positions of, good standing, high standing, positions of power? Now, this is not true for the politicians in Little Rock, which is odd because we do have a massively red state when it comes to our representation in Little Rock. But then you go to the cities, and even though collectively, like in districts, they're overcoming the cities, it just seems like, and it really, if you take the electoral aspect out of it, just take professions in general, there seems to be a lot of people who completely disagree with the worldview of the masses that they serve. And they get reminded of this. I don't know if they ever actually do realize it, but every 2 years, when they actually think they're going to get a Democrat in office from a very red district, then they get reminded that they live and work amongst people who just silently, respectfully, I disagree with this. And so I guess my point is how many superintendents were willing and ready to mask up every child, every girl and boy during the last pandemic? Okay, how many? They were eager to do it. They were eager to follow the instructions of Governor Asa Hutchinson, shutting businesses down or advising that they be shut down with, then you have the mask mandates, and then you have the state legislature elements of it. We're actually trying to sue the governor, taking him to court for doing these things, because what he was saying, what he was doing was outside of the law. Okay. How many of them were eager to follow all of those things? But now that the Department of Education comes out and says, we are removing African American studies on the basis that it's indoctrinating our kids with critical race theory, or CRT, we are removing those. We're no longer going to give you a credit for it. It's no longer going to have a code within the Department of Education. And I know this all happened and it hit the headlines 3 weeks ago, and I know I'm late to the party on this, but I feel like there needs to be a little bit of comparison here in the hypocrisy with these these city elites who it's not about do what the government says. If the different person gets into power, then they don't want to do what the government says. And I know you could do that both ways, but Sarah Huckabee Sanders is trying to actually follow the law, whereas Governor Asa Hutchinson was not. I mean, he was just amassing as much power as he could during the COVID pandemic, like many other governors in the state across the country. So here is just to kind of go over some of what's been going on over the last 3 weeks. So, yeah, Arkansas made the New York Times. We have this story here. Arkansas warns school districts not to offer AP African American Studies course by Dana Goldstein. What's new in the latest conflict between College Board and conservative policymakers? The Arkansas Department of Education warned schools on Monday, the first day of classes in many districts, not to offer advanced placement African American studies. Then we have USA Today. Arkansas schools will teach AP African American Studies despite states' objections. Okay, AP African American Studies will be taught, after all, at 6 schools in Arkansas that plan to offer it until state officials said last week students taking the course wouldn't earn high school credit for it and raised concerns about whether it's a form of indoctrination. Okay, CNN, Arkansas education officials say AP African American Studies program won't count toward graduation. There we go. So those are the stakes. Then we can go to the Arkansas Democrat Gazette. This was back on the 24th of August, and they had this panic meeting, the Democrat Black Caucus. I'm sorry, is it just the Black Caucus? Okay, whatever. They're Democrats. Arkansas officials, lawmakers meet over African American Studies course. Sanders, Olivia, legislators meet. Okay, and so you kind of get the gist here. State Senator Reginald Murdoch said those present at the hour-and-a-half-long meeting were able to talk about their concerns over the course and communicating it. He said, we feel much better after the meeting that we've accomplished something in terms of communication and better understanding to one another. After the hearing, Alexa Henning, spokeswoman for Sanders' office, said in an emailed statement that Governor Sanders was happy to meet with Democratic representatives and members of the Black Caucus to discuss the importance of education in Arkansas and the process by which AP courses meet the standards in the state. We have a new law in the books, folks. She looks forward to continuing to work with them and all teachers and schools to ensure Arkansas law is being followed. All right, so, critical race theory, what does that have to do with African American studies? Because, you've got Democrat lawmakers in this article here who are saying things like, African American history is American history. Nobody is saying that it's not. Nobody is saying that it's not. But when you have all this CRT nonsense baked in, when you have to get your students to admit the biases they have, the racial biases they have, the promotion of white guilt. This is not just happening in African American studies classes. I know a certain freshman at the University of Arkansas who, I guess they have these things for freshmen at colleges now. These classes they have to take. It's just a money scheme, and now it's obviously turned into a indoctrination scheme. But it's like a course trying to teach kids how to be on their own at college or something like that. It's just like a nanny state babying these programs. I can't remember what they're called. But it's just like, I don't know, campus life class or something. I don't know. Well, of course, they're offering, right here in Arkansas, they're offering the privilege walk, the thing that they did down at that special, math and science high school in Hot Springs. I covered that years ago, and we exposed it all, and there were hearings down in Little Rock trying to stop this indoctrination from high school. So the privilege walk, where you have to take a step forward if you've got, a mom and dad. You got to take a step forward if you're white. You got to take a step forward if you're male. You got to take a step forward if you're a Christian. And then by the end, people are taking a step back if they don't have two parents. People are taking a step back if they're black or if they're from some other minority. Are you gay? Are you trans? You take another step back. And then at the end of it, you've got the white male Christians who are at the front of the line, and they turn around and they look, and there's these giant gaps between them and their and their peer groups. This is going on, I can confirm to you right now, at the University of Arkansas. Right now, it's going on. And it's probably going on at the other universities here in the state. And so that's the kind of stuff that's baked into classes like African American Studies, AP, African American Studies. And it's not that African American history isn't American history, it very much is. But when you bake in all of it, when you're not just learning about history and instead you're trying to apply it to the students and indoctrinate the students and to get them to admit some sort of white guilt, some sort of grievance, some sort of I owe you something because of the history. Because, surprise, surprise, history is full of people who make really, really bad, sinful choices and also make good choices sometimes that contribute to the betterment of our lives moving forward. And we actually are standing on the shoulders of those men and women. Don't want to leave anybody out here. We're actually standing on the shoulders of that whole system. But instead, we have a situation now culturally where it was just we want to edit history. We want to reshape it, reform it. We want to tear down Civil War statues. Like that's going to end our arguments. Like we're never going to have any more disagreements now. We've got this generation coming up, and there's a lot of them. I forget how old I am. I've been doing this too long, so I'm stuck in like 2009. I don't know if anybody else is like that. But we've got this generation of people now that like they feel they can recognize an injustice in the past, right? But they don't know how to reconcile it for today. So the only thing they know to do is try to destroy the past and tear down Civil War statues. And now they want to tear down statues of founding fathers and Thomas Jefferson and everything else, right? And they don't know how, they don't understand that actually the gospel of Jesus Christ is how you reconcile all of this. This idea of how people do really bad things and also good things, but they don't know how to reconcile that because we've pushed Christianity out of public life, and actually every institution, for the most part, certainly nationally, has got an anti-Christian bias to it. But so they can recognize an injustice, but they don't know how to reconcile it. So the only thing they want to do is destroy the past, which is very dangerous. And it means that we're really, honestly, it's more probable that we're doomed to repeat the mistakes of the past because we're destroying things. But it isn't going to solve anything. It doesn't solve anything. I remember when Antifa, I remember Occupy Wall Street and their grievances. But I remember Antifa tearing down some of these Civil War statues. And it's like this pagan exercise, this pagan ritual where they tear down a Civil War statue and then they start kicking it. I saw one guy almost break his foot several years ago, kicking a Civil War statue, just taking out all of their anger and all of their frustration over these perceived injustices. Just full of anger, just full of rage. It's unbelievable. And what have they done? Well, they've packaged it and they use educational language. They use they hide behind affluence and they hide behind their status and they repackage this and also hide behind some sort of fake altruism when they're teaching this now to our kids, and it's in our schools. And along comes Governor Sarah Huckabee Sanders, who was elected by the people of Arkansas. And she says, no more indoctrination, no more CRT things in our schools. And it's not that African American Studies is bad in and of itself, but your course is only as good as your curriculum. Your course is only as good as your curriculum. And so the curriculum is really, really packed with all of this indoctrination and critical race theory that's just basically Marxism repackaged. And she says no. And you know what? A vast majority of Arkansans agree with her. And yet these cities in Little Rock, Jonesboro, these school districts in Little Rock, Jonesboro, and a few others are saying, you know what, we're going to offer it anyway. We'll pay for the exams, and I don't care if you're not getting to college. I don't care if we're not going to give a high school credit to this. We're going to do it anyway. Why? Why? Because they don't care what the new law says. They don't care what the government says. If Sarah Huckabee Sanders were to come out tomorrow and buy into all the hysteria and tell everybody to wear masks, I bet they would do it then. I bet they would obey then. Matter of fact, I think we're probably end up going to have a problem with masking. Inevitably here, there's going to be some superintendent that's going to try to mask our kids and put these face diapers back on them, these bacteria collectors, for 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. You mark my words, it's going to happen again, as these cases, progress, if you will. And so we'll see what happens. But, there's a huge contrast here and a lot of hypocrisy on display. African American studies indoctrinating our children. We saw so here's the other thing. The story that we covered a couple of weeks ago, I guess this would have been earlier in the summer when Boys State was kicking off, and we had the guy from UAMS there who was essentially totally indoctrinating those kids. And we had the video footage of it, and it outraged people. I mean, I got a lot of feedback on that, by the way, of people who were saying, man, I cannot believe that this is going on. Yeah, it's going on, and it's been going on for a very long time, and we're pushing back against this. As I have said on this program many times before at this point, that Christian red states across the country, mainly in the South, have had enough of this, And that is why I think in blue states, a lot of this COVID stuff is really going to come back. The hysteria, the lockdowns, the forced masks. I think there's already a school in Massachusetts who is forced masking their kids. So, I mean, it's certainly going to come back. Even though, remember, we had all of these articles coming out about COVID amnesty. We had leftists who came out and basically said, oh, man, we were really wrong about that and how we treated you conservatives who didn't believe any of this and didn't want to take the shot, didn't want to mask, didn't want to socially distance, didn't want to lock down unless you were symptomatic, and they wanted amnesty. Can we please have amnesty? Will you please just forgive us? But now they're going to pump it out all over again. I mean, you've got Anthony Fauci, who should be tried and sent to jail, if not worse. Capital punishment for that guy, honestly, if he's tried and charged with what he's actually responsible for. You've got this situation that is just really very much a powder keg, and we need to. I think though that in states like Arkansas, we can breathe. We can at least say, hey, at least we're not those states, because we have our lawmakers who are being elected by the people who believe more closely to the way that the masses do, and we haven't had that in combination with a governor that's willing to say things that we're all thinking. I mean, remember when she in the State of the Union response, the differences between basically the crazy side. I'm paraphrasing. She called them crazy. They're the crazy ones, which is what we're all thinking, and she actually said it. And so that right there is so refreshing. And now she's saying, look, no lockdowns. We're not going to shut down churches. We're not going to force masks. We're not going to make you take a vaccine. We're not going to do any of that stuff. I mean, you'd be a lot better off. If you like freedom, you like liberty, you like freedom of choice, you're a lot better in Arkansas than you are in New York or California. And so I think that's what we're going to see as this pandemic hysteria essentially ratchets back up in the media. It's another psychological operation that they're trying to employ, and we will see. And in the meantime, you have people like Tucker Carlson on his new Twitter show, or X, or whatever it is they want to call it now, saying that the real goal here for them to hold on to power is to start a hot war with Russia, which, if that happens, all bets are off, and we need to be praying against that and asking to be delivered from that for sure. So in other news, this as of recording today, so there is a blogger called the Blue Hog Report. So there's a situation with Freedom of Information Act. I don't know if you guys have seen this. So there's a guy named Matt Campbell who runs a blog called the Blue Hog Report. So he's a Democrat, and he is suing the Arkansas State Police because they won't turn over some records that have to do with how much they've spent to guard Republican Governor Sarah Huckabee Sanders. Now, I don't know. I'm not really sure why he wants to know this. Obviously, Sarah Huckabee Sanders has a young family with kids. He is now suing the state police on Monday in Pulaski County Circuit Court, petitioning Judge Herb Wright to decide whether the agency is illegally holding records. Now, the state police are saying, look, if we give this information up, we're potentially putting the governor and her family in danger because this is information that we don't need to give up. Sanders is not being sued here. It's just the Arkansas State Police. Alexa Henning, again, spokeswoman for the governor, says that this is a new low in Arkansas politics for some on the radical left to weaponize Freedom of Information Act and put the governor and her family's lives in danger, Henning said in an email. Cindy Murphy, a representative for the state police, said in a prepared statement that the documentation Campbell wants cannot be released because the information requested would violate Arkansas State Police statutory obligation to ensure the safety and security of the governor and the first family. So, and this is not the first time that they say this. And look, I mean, I've covered Campbell's reporting of some of his FOA stuff that he gets has been very, very interesting, and has helped expose corruption and that sort of thing. But this just seems odd. And like I'm a Freedom of Information Act guy. Love the Freedom of Information Act. Who doesn't? But you just got to wonder. Look, if I've got to stop this. But if Asa Hutchinson were an actual conservative, okay, stuff like this would have happened to him all the time. I'm just throwing that out there. As somebody who has been in Arkansas, covered Arkansas politics, Asa Hutchinson hardly had any problems with the media, hardly had any problems with people going after him, trying to make him look bad because he was on the team. He was advancing the ball for progressivism and for corporatism and this corporate fascist government that you really can't tell where the corporation ends and the government begins. This whole system that we're a part of right now, that we're essentially in many ways enslaved to. He was down with the cause, as were several of his followers in the Arkansas legislature. And so you had very, very little media resistance. I mean, you had people like me on the far right, when I own that entirely, but just in terms of the left, you would have thought the leftist media would have attacked, and I would put the Arkansas Democrat Gazette in the leftist media. John Brummett, columnist of the Arkansas Democrat Gazette, how many articles did he write? So just thankful and praiseworthy. I mean, he would try to parse it to still try to save some sort of intellectual credibility, but for the most part, he was a huge fan of Asa and what he did. And now all of a sudden, Sarah Huckabee Sanders is in. She's had legislative victories, the LEARNS Act. There's talk, by the way, of a special session to cut taxes here in Arkansas. I don't know if you guys have heard about this. It's like the worst kept secret in Little Rock right now. Talk of a special session soon to cut taxes further. We'll see if the governor calls that session or not. Yeah, that's all the time we have for this week's edition of Conservative Arkansas Media. My name is Paul Harrell. Thank you so much for watching. You can follow me on Twitter at RealPaulHarrell. That's right, I went back on Twitter at RealPaulHarrell. As well as don't forget to like this video on Facebook or on YouTube. Send it out. Share it with your friends. We would really very much appreciate it. Thank you so much for watching, and we will see you next time.